Discover the advantage of unlimited access to all the stories and resources from IBJ and inside Indiana business. From insights to inspiration, business leaders rely on the IBJ for all things Indiana business. Start your $1 a week trial now at ibj.com/trial offer.
I have started a vending business. I've successfully set over 200 machines. Also opened up a construction consulting business to where I can continue to lend that knowledge and expertise that I've done for roughly 30 years. Attending Bosma for me was a life-changing experience.
First-hand testimony from Ryan on how Bosma Enterprises impacts the visually impaired. Ryan's life turned upside down after a car accident left him blind. Jeff Mittman found himself in the same situation after a roadside bombing took his sight during a military mission in Iraq.
A lot of the products made by blind individuals all across the country and organizations like Bosma, they actually used on the battlefield to save my life, whether it's the bandages or the very gloves they used on me were produced by Bosma.
Mittman has come full circle since then. He now runs Indianapolis-based Bosma Enterprises, one of the largest employers for the visually impaired in the Midwest. Learn more about his journey to become CEO, the organization's mission, and how AI is playing a major role in helping the blind get jobs. It's just ahead on this edition of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. And I'm pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by Jeffrey Mittman. Jeff is the CEO of Bosma Enterprises. He has a tremendous story to tell. I'm excited to be able to share it with all of our listeners today. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, Bosma Enterprises, Bosma, that name, that organization is certainly part of the fabric of central Indiana, has been for many years, more than 100 years. Want to get into your story, which is your personal story, which is
Sure.
is inspirational in your path to the CEO role there at Bosma. But to start out with, give us the thumbnail description of Bosma Enterprises, all of the important mission that Bosma is all about.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there. I'll tell you, Bosma Enterprises is the largest employer of blind people in the Midwest. About 50% of our employees, all the way from the newest employee up to me as CEO, are blind or visually impaired. And it's an incredible opportunity to lead an organization like this. Not only are we the largest employer of people who are blind through our federal contracts, but we also have the only comprehensive blind rehabilitation program in the state of Indiana. We serve all 92 counties for people who are blind or visually impaired. And we also have a foundation, the Bosma Visionary Opportunities Foundation, that funds opportunities for people who are blind or visually impaired. So it's wonderful to lead an organization like this and see the team thrive every day and see people advance who otherwise may not have an opportunity due to the perceptions of people's capabilities, of their capabilities. And that's what we try to overcome, and that's what we do.
Talk about the perception, because I know that's a big deal. I remember having you on the show, the TV show at one point, talking about that, the perception of the blind and visually impaired.
Right.
What is it? How difficult is it to overcome?
Well, it's difficult to overcome, and I think it limits what people are given the opportunity to do. And I always tell everybody, if I can run an organization the size and as complex as Bosma Enterprises to somebody who's blind or visually impaired, why don't you think one of my employees or one of our clients could do customer service for you, or to work in your warehouse, or to whatever it is. So our job is really to overcome that, to change the perception, and do that through examples throughout the community. I tell my employees all the time that when you're here at Bosma, you're representing Bosma, and then when you're on the bus riding home, or you're at the mall, or you're at the grocery store, people are watching. They're watching how well you do and how you act and everything else. So it's overcoming that through what we do here and then what we do in the community on a daily basis.
Workforce is such an important issue throughout the state of Indiana for all industries, and filling that employee pipeline. And I know that's a big part of what you do at Bosma in terms of training and getting individuals ready for the workforce. Talk about that component and the success rate and the success story that is the workforce piece at Bosma.
people who are blind or visually impaired face, somewhere between the 55-70% unemployment rate across the country.
Yeah.
And we have part of our programs, we have employment services where every year we place about 30 individuals who are blind or visually impaired in employment in central Indiana. So they're going out and they're working in the community and people are seeing them. And that's we get back to what we're trying to overcome. But technology is a great equalizer. If we get somebody in and we get them trained up on computers or how to use adaptive software and how to function and how to travel independently and everything else, they're going to do everything everybody else can. I always said once I got hurt and lost my vision, the only thing I can't do is drive a car or fly an airplane. Last time I drove a vehicle, I got hurt. And I've never flown an airplane anyway, so I'm good to go.
Yeah.
But anything else can be done. It can be adapted. We can adapt any job for somebody who's blind or visually impaired to do. So that's what we do here. My employment services team is out every day looking for opportunities for people who are blind or visually impaired. And what we find is once we get somebody to hire somebody, they come back looking for somebody else because you're talking about a dedicated individual who had struggled maybe their whole life to find employment. They now have employment. They're a pretty loyal employee, I can tell you that much.
Yeah. You mentioned setting an example, and I can't think of a better example than you, as you set an example for those who are at Bosma and certainly far behind. Jeff, talk about the day that really changed everything for you, and I believe it was 2005. You were on yet another deployment in the Middle East, and there was a roadside IED. Just talk about what happened.
Sure, absolutely. So it was July 7th of 2005. I think many people who will remember that as the day of the London bombings when they attacked the transportation system in London. It's the same day. I was in Iraq. I was on my fourth combat tour, and this time I was an advisor to an Iraqi battalion. And we were moving out that morning to link up with our Iraqi brothers to go on a mission there in Baghdad, and we're in a two-vehicle convoy. It just so happens I was driving that day. We used to take turns. One day you drive, one day you be in the gun, one day you command the vehicle. I was driving. Two-vehicle convoy came down off an on-ramp onto an expressway. It's probably doing 55, 60 miles an hour, and the enemy blew an ambush on us and initiated with that IED, a roadside bomb. And it sent a projectile through my driver's side window. If you draw an X across that window, right where those lines cross is where that projectile entered, right next to my head. Came across my body, went through the radios sitting next to me and out the other side of an up armored Humvee all the way through the armor. Left a hole the size of my fist all the way through the armor. And went over a rise down into a canal. And I woke up a month later at Walter Reed, the old Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., with my wife speaking to me. I was unconscious for about a month in a medically induced coma. And then since then, I've had to, I've had 40 operations. I spent about 5.5 years in medical care before I retired and then went off into the civilian world to conquer that. And that's how I ended up going back to work. And my first job was for National Industries for the Blind out of Alexandria, Virginia. And that's kind of the parent organization for organizations like Bosma all across the country. I worked there for a few years. And I moved to the Department of Defense here in Indianapolis. I worked for the Defense Finance and Accounting Service.
Yeah.
While I was there, I was on the board of directors at Bosma. And then in 2018, I was asked to come on board and then became the CEO in 2019.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little bit of full circle. A lot of the products made by blind individuals all across the country and organizations like Bosma, they actually used on the battlefield to save my life, whether it's the bandages or the very gloves they used on me were produced by Bosma.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, so I kind of come full circle. The padding in my helmet I was wearing that day, and that helmet sitting on the shelf behind me, is made by blind individuals in North Carolina. That protected my head from the blast and everything. So it's a little bit of a full circle that I've come back now, and I'm the CEO at Bosma.
Yeah. When you think back on that, Jeff, when doctors told you that your vision was going to be gone, was gone forever, how did you process that reality at that time?
It was actually a hard day, and I'm thankful for it now. I had my wife obviously was out there with me in DC, and one of my teammates had been injured, and she'd gone off that day to assist his family in adapting to, they brought him to the Naval Center, the Navy Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, instead of Walter Reed, where I was. She'd gone out there to help the family. While she was gone, the doctors came and got me. took me down to the eye clinic. I'd been awake for a couple of weeks. I had a tracheotomy, so they taught me how to speak with that, and I could communicate, tell them what I could see and everything. They examined me and told me, "Hey, listen, your vision's gone. There's not much we can do about it. As a matter of fact, it may get worse someday." And there I sat. I was 35 years old. I had wife, 2 children, and I was upset. It's
Yeah.
the one day of my life and my recovery that I was really upset. About that time, my wife found me down in the clinic. She'd returned, found me in the clinic, took me upstairs, and as we sat there talking, and she was trying to console me and calm me down, and received a phone call that my friend, who she'd just visited, his family had passed away.
Uh,
All within about, a 45-minute period or whatever. I was told I'd lost my vision and all that. And it really kind of set me straight that I was truly the lucky one. I was there, sitting there with my wife. My children were safe. And it kind of set me on the path of, okay, it's time to go. You had your 45 minutes of downtime.
uh,
It's now time to get up and move. So I've kind of been moving for the last 20 years.
yeah. So that was the
So,
yeah. I was going to ask you about that. That was the
yeah,
moment you decided you're going to move forward
yeah,
because
yeah.
so many individuals, so many people faced with your situation probably wouldn't make that decision, or maybe would decide to maybe quit or give up. But that was the moment that you decided let's go, let's move on.
It was the moment for me to move on. I had a wife and 2 children, and my injuries never relieved me of that responsibility. And I'm thankful. I was 35 when I got hurt. I was financially sound. I had a family. I had kids. I had that support system around me, and that's a big part of it. And I had that responsibility. So all I had to do is figure out. Other people have gone through this. What did they do?
Right.
And how do I network that? And how do I figure that out? And I didn't know how at the time, but I know I could do it. I just had to figure out how. So,
Yeah. How how has your journey, your challenges, the challenges that you faced,
mhm.
how have those things shaped your leadership as a CEO, as a leader of an organization?
Well, I think it's as a leader, I believe anything's possible. You just got to figure out how to do it. And I don't see obstacles as much as different pathways. I see different pathways. I have an obstacle, I can go through it, over it, or blow it up. So how do I figure out how to get around an obstacle? And I don't see it as a stopping point. I just see it as an alternative route. How do I get around this obstacle? And I
Right.
think I try to convey that. And I think my experience has probably made me push harder, because as an individual, I had to push hard. So I think it's formed and it's not just my injuries and my experience, but my whole military background, 22 years in the Army, has taught me that if there's a mission, you just got to find a way to do it. So how do we gather the resources, and remove obstacles out of my team's way so that we can get things done? And that's kind of how I approach everything's. Probably a little bit different than a lot you see in a lot of civilian organizations, but that's how I do lead. So
Yeah, and I think that you do a fair amount, or at least at one point, I know you did in terms of public speaking.
quite a bit, yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah,
I've done hundreds, all the way from England to Seattle to New York to wherever.
yeah,
I think that was a big part of my recovery. Actually, the Army allowed me. I'd have a surgery, and I'd go out while I'm recovering, do a speech, come back, have another surgery, go out. It was a lot of my
wow,
recovery as I did that. So I've done several. I don't do as many now just because of my schedule and my commitments.
yeah.
But I got a couple coming up, and I still do it, and it's one of those things where it allows me to share my story, and I purposely don't try to teach a lesson.
Uh-huh.
I kind of tell my story, and I think people take from it what they will, and they apply it to their own life, whatever that may be, whether they're going through a hard time, a divorce, or financial issues, or business issues, or whatever it is. They take that lesson and apply it to their own self.
Was
So,
Yeah, was it important for you to do that, to speak, to kinda spread your message to others, to kinda get it out there?
yeah, I think it was because I think when I flash back to when I got hurt, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah,
And I think providing that example for others, no matter what situation you're in, it all boils down to the same thing. Here I am. What do I do? What are my what are my
yeah,
options? Which one do I pick, and where do I go?
yeah.
And kind of having that conversation with people all across the country has been, I think, important to me, and I think it's been a big part of my recovery too. I've never been shy to speak about what happened to me, or to be in public, or to do anything else. So it's been enjoyable, quite frankly.
Yeah. Circle back to Bosma
Sure.
and the landscape now in your industry, and you're a nonprofit, but it's a business, no question about it. What are your biggest challenges, opportunities? How have things changed? How have the landscape has the landscape changed in your sector since you became CEO?
Well, I think a big part of the change in the landscape, number one, nonprofits just a tax status, right? If you don't
Right.
make money,
Yeah.
you don't exist.
Yep.
So I think the environment's changed, and that there's a big push for domestication of manufacturing and product production and services and everything else. So you're talking about shifting a whole supply chain from around the world.
Right.
That just doesn't turn on a dime. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And building new industries in America that we have to work with, and manufacturing and processes and timelines and shift. It's just been a complete flip of 180 of where it was, 10 years ago. So it's been a big change, and it's been at times painful but challenging and also exciting too,
Yeah.
as we bring manufacturing back to the States and the American people. So it's been a good time.
Want to get more into that and the role technology is playing at Bosma, and what's next as well. Talk about all those things and more when the Business and Beyond podcast returns. Stay with us.
As a bank, PNC prides itself on being boring. But the truth is they couldn't be more excited to serve the dynamic Indianapolis community. For nearly 160 years, they've quietly toiled away to deliver brilliant results for their equally brilliant clients. They have dedicated PNC teams throughout the local area, all ready to do the boring work to help you unlock your own brilliance. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. PNC Bank, National Association member FDIC.
We build Indiana. The Laborers International Union of North America builds and maintains roads, bridges, and other essential infrastructure that make us the crossroads of America. So thanks to LIUNA members' work, Hoosiers have a better quality of life, like access to utilities, easier routes to jobs, schools, or medical care, and deliveries keep moving. We build Indiana for good jobs and stronger communities. The Laborers International Union of North America. We are LIUNA.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Jeff Mittman. Jeff is the CEO at Bosma Enterprises, based here in Indianapolis, but certainly with a statewide footprint as well. And to that point, Jeff, you mentioned that in the first part of the podcast that you touch, I think you indicated, you touch all 92 Indiana counties. So based here in Indianapolis, long history here, but you really do have a statewide footprint.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. We have a statewide footprint. So within my programs, what we really have, that's broken down into three areas. You have your residential rehabilitation center here in Indiana, where we bring people from all across the state in for basically a 16-week program to help them adapt to vision loss and everything else. We also have our employment services, where we serve people all across central Indiana. And then I have a senior program where my team actually goes out into homes of senior people, senior individuals who have lost vision, and help them adapt to their environment. What our mission there is to allow them to adapt and age in place, and allow them to stay independent as long as they can. We do that in all 92 counties, so it's very important. It's an expensive endeavor, but we're putting forth the resources and efforts to do it. So it's been a great program for a lot of people. We're serving about 1,000 Hoosiers a year here at Bosma through our programs.
Wow, that's a big number. What would be a typical client, if you will, at Bosma in terms of age and those types of things?
Well, I think age kind of runs the spectrum. We go from basically we have a STEP program, so it's a student training program, which is high school kids, and we're trying to give high school kids are visually impaired work experience. So we run a program throughout the summer where we're bringing kids in, getting them jobs and allowing them. And what we're trying to teach them, there's twofold really. giving them the experience of having to show up to work, to have to act as a professional, to be in a work environment. And then as we're doing that, we're also teaching the organizations and the companies we work with what people who are blind or visually impaired can do. So it's got twofold. So we're doing that. Then we have our adult program, which is basically our rehabilitation program, where we're bringing people in normally who have lost their vision somewhere later, not after most of them were not born visually impaired. There is a percentage that are, but we're bringing them in and teaching them, helping them to adjust to that vision loss. If you can imagine being 25 years old, you're working, you're a truck driver, you're working in a warehouse, and then all of a sudden you wake up, you can't see.
Yeah.
What do you do? That's what we help them with, from O&M, orientation and mobility, traveling independently, using computers, working around in your home. So at our rehab center, we have all these areas set up. We have an apartment that we can help people adapt to. How do I do laundry if I have no vision? How do I work in the kitchen if I have no vision? How do I survive? And then we like to transition them into our employment services or help them with school. So we've got a stat that, a year after coming through a rehab center, 75% are either in higher education or employed or looking for a job somewhere. So that success rate is what we're really after, providing opportunities for people who are blind or visually impaired. And we do that by first teaching them how to adjust to their vision loss, and then giving them the skills to succeed in whatever their endeavor is, whether that's higher education or it's employment, whatever that might be. And that's really important. And then, of course, we have our senior program where we're helping people who have lost vision later in life. A lot of times you lose vision because, diabetes or macular degeneration or whatever it might be, and helping them adjust so that they can age in place.
Yeah. What, Jeff, in terms of the importance in this whole process of the business community, how important is business support, be it support financially for what you do, or
Right.
really being open to hiring and being a part of that workforce pipeline process?
Oh, it's vitally important. I have to have organizations willing to, some people would say take a chance. I would say, I don't even say it's a chance. I think being open to an alternative view of what people who are blind or visually impaired are able to do,
Right.
having them open to that. And then, of course, obviously financial support, sponsorships at our events, donations to our foundation is vitally important, that we can continue to provide all these programs to Hoosiers all across the state of Indiana. So being open to the employment side, being open for financial support, being open to doing business with Bosma on the enterprises side
Right.
is vitally important. That's because I tell everybody, I said, listen, when you work with Bosma, you're going to get the same service, product, and everything else that you would from any other similarly sized or capable organization. Just so happens we do it with 50% of our workforce being blind or visually impaired. You should notice no difference. So,
Yeah. Technology, artificial intelligence,
mhm.
new ways of doing things, certainly transforming business, to be sure, across all industries. How is technology, Jeff, impacting or changing, modifying the way you do business there at Bosma?
Well, I think I may have mentioned earlier, technology is a great equalizer. So one of our goals here at Bosma is not just to provide somebody a job, but provide them a career advancement. So one of the things that as an example of technology being used to do that, one of the things we've done is created. We obviously have to do annual inventories and cycle counts and everything else in our warehouse. We're carrying, we have 150,000 feet of warehouse space. One of the things we started to do is use drones to do some of those cycle counts in the inventory, and we actually have the software and everything else that we have blind and visually impaired individuals doing the cycle count with drones in our warehouse. That's a perfect example of how we level people up in their career, their skill set, to do that. We're working on some automation products in our production area and our automation projects, excuse me, in our production area to say we take a manual job, somebody's doing a manual job, and now they become a machine operator, or they become whatever that might be through the use of technology.
Yeah.
So that's great. And it's huge in our program side too, adaptive software and everything else, as we're training people to live with vision loss and to go off into the world independently. AI and computers and cell phones and everything else play a huge part in that. So we spend a lot of time training that and a lot of resources investing in that. And it's great to see it take hold in an individual who maybe a year ago thought their professional life was over or they didn't know what to do, and see what they're doing now. It's a pretty incredible thing to see.
Yeah. Do you see technology maybe as helping to reduce that high unemployment rate you talked about among
Yeah.
blind and visually impaired?
It was interesting during the pandemic. There was through all the remote work and that wave that hit us during the pandemic. What we saw was a big uptick in our placements, and a lot of that was through the use of technology because our employees, or I'm sorry, our clients, as we were trying to find them work and going through that process, the interviews were no longer in person; they were on Zoom on a computer, right?
Yeah.
And from the very moment they stepped onto the interview process, they were displaying their skill sets as they're using, the Zoom and the computer and everything else to actually participate in that workforce. And they were proving up front without the question having to be asked whether they could use technology. It was
Yeah.
a manual display of that, it was an actual display of that technology and that capability. So yes, I believe 100% that technology and remote work and everything else is making a small, very,
Yeah.
very small dent in that, but there's more work to do. The work will still be there long after I'm gone, so we're gonna just keep at it.
Yeah. Lots of challenges to be sure. What gives you, Jeff, the most hope about the future for people who are blind or visually impaired? Obviously, you're on the front lines working it every day. What gives you the most hope of better outcomes in the future?
I think the technology piece. I think
Yeah.
the technology piece, it really is. It allows somebody, if we go back 50 years before we had computers and somebody who's completely blind trying to write a letter, if I send you an email on a computer, you have no clue that I'm visually impaired. There's no difference in the work product. So again, I think it's the advancement in technology and AI as individuals who are blind or visually impaired learn AI and they become the experts in it and the uses of it. And because what you see is people who are blind or visually impaired a lot of times are drawn to the technology field and the AI and everything else because they see the usefulness of it in their daily lives, not just their work lives, but their daily lives. So a lot of times you see them as early adopters
Yeah.
of a new technology. And I think that is going to be vital to the future of employment for people who are blind or visually impaired.
As you look at the future, specifically there at Bosma, what's next? You go out 5 years or so, 5 or 10 years. How do you envision Bosma in terms of its footprint, its impact, the things it'll be doing in the future?
Well, we're going to be bigger. We're going to be serving more clients. We're going to be doing different things, manufacturing different things, using different machinery as we go through our new strategic plan that launches in July. And I also see us having a bigger impact in the community and us being more present and more supportive across the community here in Indiana as we work with other organizations, whether that's the Indiana School for the Blind or VIPS or whatever it may be, assisting other organizations more as a community and not individual orgs all
Right.
across the state, and banding together with that to actually make a difference for Hoosiers who are blind or visually impaired.
Yeah, is that collaboration, that whole idea that you talk about there? I'm sure it's always been important, but maybe even now more so in this day and age and going forward, the ability to collaborate with other organizations, maybe more critical now?
Oh, I think it's absolutely more critical now because what you have is you have more competition for resources, you have more
Right.
competition for attention, you have more blind and visually impaired people.
Right.
As the population ages, that percentage of people who are blind or visually impaired is climbing.
Yeah.
Uh, as people age into those issues, and it's going to be vital that whatever the organization is, and not just other blind organizations, but other organizations, companies, individuals across the state, we need to do a better job of collaborating. We don't operate in a vacuum. What I does affects this organization to my left and right, and getting that understanding together and moving forward with that thought process will be vital to assisting people who are blind or visually impaired.
Jeff Mittman, the CEO at Bosma. Jeff, it's been a real treat to catch up with you. You are a real inspiration, not only folks there at Bosma, but the larger community as well. And thank you for the work you do and your commitment to community as well. And I hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. We are a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Get a behind-the-scenes look at Indiana's most influential leaders. On Business and Beyond, we go beyond titles and resumes to explore the personal stories, pivotal moments, and hard-won lessons that shape Hoosier leadership. Hear from the people driving Indiana forward in their own words. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast or at ibjpodcasts.com.
The IBJ Media Podcast Network is the soundtrack of a growing state. Indiana is on the move, and you can hear it happening on the IBJ Media Podcast Network. We bring you the voices at the center of our economy, our courts, our companies, and our communities. Subscribe now and be part of the conversation that's building Indiana's future. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit ibjpodcasts.com.